This week on Crossroads Politics, the 2025 legislative session comes to an end.
When we see a challenge and we get a challenge, we meet it and we excel through it. And that's what House Bill 1001 does. That's what Senate Bill 1 does. That's what this session of the Indiana General Assembly has done. I appreciate your support on House Bill 10.
Lawmakers stay up into the early morning hours, passing a rebuilt budget for the state.
I think one of the most important things that this budget does, it looks ahead into the next century.
Democrats push back about a rushed bill with alleged overreach.
It is about power and it is about control. It's about the slow, calculated erosion of academic independence in Indiana.
But couldn't stop the final push across the finish line. Hey there, thanks so much for joining us on Crossroads Politics here on WTHR Plus. I'm Dustin Grove. We've got a packed show for you this week. State lawmakers wrapped up their work for the year, required an all-nighter pretty much to pass a new two-year budget. Our good friend Nikki Kelly, editor of the Capitol Chronicle, will join us shortly with some of her takeaways. But we want to begin with Emily Longnecker. Emily, you and photojournalist Chris Webb, you were up all night as well, Thursday into Friday. This budget has been a tough one, given that 11th hour revenue forecast that basically gave them a $2 billion hole to dig out of. And they didn't even get to budget discussions until late into the night, did they?
You know, Dustin, right. It was a long night. Lawmakers in the House didn't even start talking about the budget until just after 11 Thursday night. It was a little bit after that the Senate took it up. By 1:30 a.m. Friday morning, lawmakers in both chambers had passed a new two-year budget. Let's take a look at some of the particulars of that budget. It weighs in at $45 billion over the next 2 years. Lawmakers had to rework the final version after they got that tough April revenue forecast last week, saying that the state was going to bring in $2 billion less in revenue over the next 2 years. Lawmakers tried to make up that difference with a hike in the cigarette tax and a hike on tax on other tobacco products. Cigarettes are now going to cost $2 more a pack. That tax hike is expected to bring in about $800 million over 2 years. That money is set to go to Medicaid. Now, the budget also cuts public health funding and the budget of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation and public broadcasting. K through 12 education gets a 2% hike in funding each of the 2 years. The budget also funds universal school vouchers in the second year.
I think one of the most important things that this budget does, it looks ahead into the next century. It does. It does. Because you know what? K-12 and the commitment to education is going to affect people in the next century. It also has an increase in the cigarette tax. Really important for the long-term sustainability of the state fiscally. Because we know by data, for young people, the price of cigarettes determines how many will start to smoke. And we know the results.
And House Democrats really criticized not having a say in that final version of the budget, saying that they really didn't have a seat at the table. Many said that they thought that this budget took Indiana backwards, especially when it comes to that cut in public health funding, going from $100 million a year to $40 million a year.
A week ago, 10 days ago, two dignitaries flew in from Washington, D.C., had a big press conference, talking about make Indiana healthy again. Make Indiana healthy again, $100 million. There really should be $200 or $300 million. Now it's cut down to $40 million. We're going to make Indiana healthy again by cutting from $100 million to $40 million. Per year. That's making Indiana healthy again.
I know Democrats had also spoken out, concerned, disappointed that they weren't more involved in the conversation. But Emily, there was a last-minute addition to that budget that caused some real controversy, and it had nothing to do with taxes or money or funding, right?
Right, Dustin. It got a lot of pushback from Democrats, that last minute addition that you're talking about, and that was put into the budget. And basically, it would allow Governor Braun to appoint all 9 members of IU's Board of Trustees. Now, right now, alumni, they elect 3 of those board members, and the governor appoints 6. But under this bill, Governor Braun would appoint all 9 members. It also allows him to remove a member of the Board of Trustees for any reason. Dems decried that move, saying that they were given really no warning that this was in the budget here last minute, and they felt like the public and folks from IU should have had a chance to come and testify about this.
And this isn't just about trustees. It isn't just about this particular process. It is about power, and it is about control. It's about the slow, calculated erosion of academic independence in Indiana. Because buried in this budget is a provision that strips the IU alumni of their voice, ending a century and a half of democratic input into the university's Board of Trustees.
Republicans defended the decision. Take a listen.
Indiana University is a big university, state university. As it was noted earlier, very few participants in the election of the trustees, and just better served to have the highest elected official in the state appointed trustees for that board.
Mr. Speaker, obviously you're a big fan.
And several Democrats took to the House floor last night to speak out on this last-minute provision involving IU's Board of Trustees, saying that it marked a real loss of independence for higher education. Dustin?
All right, Emily, we'll come back to you in just a minute. I want to bring in Nikki Kelly with the Capitol Chronicle. Nikki, we've talked about some of the big changes in this bill. Were there other significant changes from this most recent version, you think?
I mean, there were changes everywhere in it. They trimmed pretty much all the general government line items they could. They zeroed out public broadcasting line items. In addition to the Board of Trustees language, there's language in their higher education language that would impact all higher ed in terms of reviewing tenure professors every 5 years to, I guess, consider whether they're doing enough work. They're going to review degree programs. CHE is going to review degree programs to see if they're giving enough degrees to justify. So there was a lot of new language that people were grappling with yesterday and last night.
This was a real sprint to the finish line. Did we get a fiscal note on the final version?
No, and there usually isn't one until a couple days after. And the irony is, we passed that bill last. They were already changing things in the budget in bills beforehand. And so it was almost like, I don't know, and they're just trying to get everything out there and say that they gave people time to review it. But, you know, it's always very messy at the end.
Is this common? Is this, as somebody who's covered the State House for a number of years, is this final sprint, this rush to get it done, that's pretty common, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do wish, my only personal pet peeve is when they finish early, because technically April 29th is when they should finish. You at least know it has to end by midnight. But when they pull these like leaving early days, we end up at 2 in the morning.
They really wanted to be done on Friday.
Yes, apparently so.
Yeah.
Well, the House Speaker's goal was to eat dinner outside, like at home last night. That did not happen.
Oh, well, maybe next year. All right, we'll be back with you as well, Nikki. Thank you. And we've got much more to come here on Crossroads Politics.
This is a sensitive subject for many.
Lawmakers feel the heat when they debate taking consent out of a bill on sex ed in Indiana schools. We'll get into that. And the Indiana Economic Development Corporation spends millions of dollars with the goal to bring businesses to Indiana, but they have a reputation for keeping details very close to the vest. Why the governor is now launching an investigation into the seemingly secretive agency. But first,
it's been a long time coming. A lot of work has been put into this, so we're really excited to see this happen.
part of that new 2-year state budget includes a big increase in the tobacco and cigarette tax in Indiana, as Emily mentioned. How health advocates are reacting to the sudden change. That's also when we come back here on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back to Crossroads Politics. As we mentioned, one way lawmakers are looking to increase revenue is through a tobacco tax, raising the price of a pack of cigarettes by nearly 40%. While this twofold approach aims to reduce smoking, health advocates tell our Alex Almanza the tax is a compromise they're hoping to work with.
Under current state tobacco tax, for example, a $5 pack of cigarettes would end up costing around $5.99. But a new proposal would bring that tax up by $2, making it almost $8, and that's before sales tax. It's the first cigarette tax increase Indiana has seen since 2007. Anti-smoking advocates say it's long overdue, and they're hoping the price hike leads to fewer smokers.
We know by increasing the cigarette tax by $2 per pack that we're helping over 32,000 Hoosiers quit smoking, but we're also preventing people from picking up that habit.
Health advocates point to teens and young adults as some of the most price-sensitive groups. By driving up the cost of cigarettes and other tobacco products, they believe fewer teens will start using tobacco in the first place. Meanwhile, public health programs are facing funding cuts, including Health First Indiana, which helped support anti-smoking campaigns in all 92 counties. While lawmakers look to cut public health funding, health advocates are calling the tax increase a compromise years in the making.
It's been a long time coming. A lot of work has been put into this, so we're really excited to see this happen.
In Indianapolis, Alex Almanza, 13 News.
The cigarette tax is one of a number of changes lawmakers made after that gloomy revenue forecast that came out mid-April. To help us understand the numbers driving the budget, Stephanie Wells with the Indiana Fiscal Policy Institute joins me now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Dustin.
So why such a big drop, a big change in this revenue forecast?
So I wouldn't really define it as a drop. Okay. I think it's that our economy is still growing, but it is growing much more slowly. And much less than we would like compared to what we thought in the fourth quarter of 2024.
What are some key takeaways for you from the decisions made in this budget, the adjustments made and what they finally ended up with?
So, I think it's interesting from our perspective that they're continuing on with the income tax, lowering those rates through fiscal year 2026 and 2027. We're going to see $2 billion less of revenue. Potentially we have higher Medicaid obligations. We really don't know until we know what the federal government's going to do on some of their spending. But we're continuing on with those tax cuts and also property tax cuts. So this is really going to hamper the ability to deliver government services at a state and local level.
So at what point do you think the local level, municipalities, Hoosiers from north to south will start to feel the impact of this?
I think nearly immediately, because they're going to need to start making budgetary changes.
Lawmakers made a lot of changes to this budget. Do any in particular stand out to you?
Yeah, I think like everyone else, they opted to continue with choice expansion, which we sometimes call voucher expansion, which is also going to impact the amount of funds that go to our public K through 12 schools. The changes in higher ed, as we're trying to build a more talented workforce that meets the needs of employers, any impact on higher ed funding is going to potentially have a negative impact. And then obviously the changes to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation funding. We've done a really good job over the past 20 years of bringing business into Indiana, and the governor is realigning the metrics that they want that organization to work for, and also, they're really changing the way in which they're funded.
One of the other headlines from the cuts was public health, right? The pretty significant cut.
Significant.
Remind me what that cut was. It was something like
100 million to 40.
Yeah, that's right.
That's huge. There's some argument, and I haven't been in their books, that maybe they weren't able to spend all of that money, so there's still some money that they can play with, but that's definitely a huge decrease. And I know public health departments were hoping to ramp up a lot more initiatives to make Hoosiers healthy again.
All right, more to come on that. Stephanie Wells, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Helping us understand that. Well, the budget dominated the last week of the legislative session, but it was far from the only bill to fight its way to the finish line. Emily Longnecker, not a lawmaker just yet. Lawmakers wrapped up work on everything from human trafficking to also sex ed at school.
Yeah, Dustin, they did. And some of these bills came with some controversy. Let's start with the bill dealing with sex ed in schools, Senate Bill 442. Now, basically, this bill gave oversight to school districts about the curriculum for sex ed. School boards would have to vote and approve the curriculum, and also that curriculum would have to be posted on a district's website so parents knew what their kids were going to learn. The debate came over the issue of consent and whether it should be part of what kids learn in school when they're learning about sex. That requirement was added to Senate Bill 442 when it got over to the House this session. Earlier this week, Republican State Senator Gary Byrne, the original bill's author and the chairman of the conference committee that met this week to discuss changes to the bill, removed language requiring schools to teach consent. Byrne thought it should be up to local school boards to decide if consent should be taught. He called it a sensitive issue, saying different communities had different ideas about the topic. That caused several Democratic lawmakers on the committee to speak out against removing the language dealing with teaching consent. Wednesday morning, Byrne sent out a statement saying the consent language was back in the bill. That statement said in part, Senate Bill 442 would, quote, retain language added by the House of Representatives, which would require schools to teach about the importance of consent to sexual activity in an age-appropriate way and teach about fetal development during pregnancy. On Wednesday, the final version of Senate Bill 442 passed the House and Senate. It is now headed to the governor's desk. Dustin?
Emily, can you break down for us what else made it through the conference committee process and what did not?
Yeah, so one bill that made it through, and it got a lot of pushback, but barring a veto from Governor Braun, starting July 1st, every candidate who runs for school board will have to declare a party or identify as an independent. School board elections are some of the last elections to avoid partisan politics, but some members of the Senate thought that was a problem. Supporters of this bill say it will allow voters to have a better idea of who they are voting for. Opponents say it inserts politics into schools and will likely discourage some folks from running for school board. Another issue that drew a lot of controversy, language that opponents say criminalized homelessness. It started out as a bill in the House that passed out of committee but was never called for a vote on the House floor. That same language was added to a bill that had already passed the Senate. The author of that Senate bill protested, so the language was then put into a different House bill but was taken back out there too. The bill would have made it a Class C misdemeanor to sleep on public property in several cases. Opponents say it made it a crime to be homeless, while the original bill's author, Republican State Representative Michelle Davis, said it was about getting the unhoused the help they needed. In the end, that language never found a final home. Another bill that went through some twists and turns dealt with combating human trafficking. The bill required gas stations to put up posters with information about resources for human trafficking victims. The idea being that going to the bathroom at a gas station is one of the only times human trafficking victims might be alone without the person trafficking them. Some convenience store owners pushed back, saying they already do this, so lawmakers shouldn't require it. Language about massage parlors, another frequent trafficking hotspot, was removed during conference committee, but the requirement for posters did pass. And Dustin, this is just a sample of some of the bills that made it through, except for that language dealing on homelessness. We'll be breaking down bills that pass and the impacts that they're going to have for weeks to come.
And we will have it here on Crossroads Politics. Thank you, Emily, for all of the work you and your photojournalist partner, Chris Webb, have done at the State House this session. People at home, I wish more people could see what all goes into covering all of this, as fast and as furious as it happens, and the hours you all put into it, everybody at the State House. So thank you very much. Another last-minute pass, one of the issues our 13 Investigates team has been following carefully. This one about having an automatic external defibrillator in all schools. This is one of those issues that has moved to several different bills, but it did pass both chambers last night in a bigger education bill. So here's what it does. It requires most every school to have an AED at activities like athletic and theater events where students have an increased risk of cardiac arrest. 13 Investigates has reported how currently AEDs are not required in schools, and many do not have plans in place to use them. Well, this new law changes that. It will require schools to have both the AEDs and a specific plan for each location where it might be used. Now that plan, House Bill 1515, heads to the governor's desk. But another bill 13 Investigates was following died at the last hour in conference committee. Both the House and Senate gave bipartisan support to restrictions for Delta 8, marijuana's cousin. And it went to conference committee, never made it any further. Delta 8 is described as, again, a cousin to marijuana, and currently there are no restrictions on who can buy it or how it should be tested. 13 Investigates reporting showed how many of those products have THC levels well above what is allowed in Indiana. Lawmakers were set to require somebody to be 21 to buy Delta 8 and to create testing requirements. But the Attorney General did not like that bill, urged lawmakers to reject it. This is the fourth year in a row that proposed Delta 8 regulations have passed at least one chamber in the State House, but then failed to get to the governor's desk in the end. So this is surely going to remain an issue, and you can be sure 13 Investigates will continue to report on it. Nikki, a long session in the books now with some interesting twists and turns as we see every year. What stands out to you most about this session, you think?
Well, you were just mentioning the hemp bill. That was a fascinating thing to watch. I mean, I think they're caught in that loop of, we have like Wild West right now. It's like legal federally, but no one's testing for it. So on one side, people were like, well, let's legalize it and regulate it. On the other side was, well, but if you do that, and they're also not taxing it like they would marijuana, you're basically creating a parallel marijuana industry with, you know, vast, like 20,000 permittees. So that one was really fascinating to watch. There were lots of little stuff here and there where we banned advertising on marijuana in the state. You know, we've passed a ton of education bills. So, and I think Governor Braun had a pretty good first session. I think he was very limited with the fiscal fortunes that came his way. But I think he can claim victory at least on several key issues. The one big one on his was really wanting to move forward on healthcare prices. And there was a lot of smoke, and I think we're going to have to see if there's any actual, you know, progress, because many of those bills came out kind of strong and just were pared back the whole time.
Yeah, there seemed to be more smoke this year in that area than in years past, because there's always been some level of discussion, but it really seemed to ramp up.
Well, for years, lawmakers have tried the transparency route, and I think many of them were frustrated and it was time to go further on things like price caps and you know, those kinds of issues, the PBM, pharmacy benefit managers. And so as they pushed harder, they got pushed back against lobbyists. And there were some, I would say, incremental changes, but not sure if overall it's going to mean much of an impact for Hoosiers.
Based on what you and your team covered, was there anything that was left unfinished that will likely have to be taken back up next year?
Oh gosh, I'm sure a lot of lawmakers would say a lot of the bills.
It's a subjective question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll definitely see some of that homelessness language again. There was the issue of rental caps that came up right at the very end that, you know, they threw into a bill and then immediately took out. I'm sure we'll see more local control, preemptions, those kinds of things. We passed a lot of utility bills to try to allow like diversification to our electricity grid, actually less diversification and more protection of coal plants or you know, that kind of thing. So we'll see about those, because there was a ton of very important utility bills too.
All right. Well, I thanked Emily. I want to thank you and your team as well. You are doing remarkable work to let all of us know what's going on inside the State House that is going to affect all of us.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Still ahead here, investigating some big investments.
I have directed the hiring of an independent forensic auditor of the IEDC and its affiliated entities.
Governor Mike Braun takes aim at the quasi-public agency that spends millions attracting businesses to the state. Why he's forcing transparency and launching an investigation. Next on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. Indiana's Economic Development Agency is officially under investigation. The Indiana Economic Development Corporation, or IEDC, spends millions of state dollars to attract and keep businesses here in Indiana. It's a quasi-government agency, but exactly how a lot of that money is spent and who's getting it has largely been kept secret over the years. Even on the campaign trail, Governor Mike Braun said he wanted to see more transparency, and this week, he ordered a full investigation into the office. Senior investigative reporter Bob Siegel explains why the governor is taking action.
The IEDC gets hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money to attract businesses to Indiana. Now, the state agency is attracting scrutiny following allegations of secret backroom deals and financial impropriety.
I have directed the hiring of an independent forensic auditor of the IEDC and its affiliated entities.
Thursday afternoon, the governor doubled down on his pledge to bring transparency to the state's Economic Development Agency, announcing that he is ordering a forensic audit to determine how the agency and its secretive affiliates have spent millions of dollars.
Where we have found impropriety or even the appearance of it, we have reported it to the Inspector General. We're not rushing to conclusions. We want to make sure things are reviewed independently. Only then will we take any and all appropriate action.
The announcement comes after a report from Hannah News Service that raises big questions about the inner workings of IEDC's nonprofit foundation and its venture capital arm called Elevate Ventures.
The current funds that have been designated for Elevate Ventures are now frozen.
Today's announcement by the Commerce Secretary and Governor comes a full decade after 13 Investigates first exposed fabricated job numbers and a complete lack of transparency from IEDC. All these deserted office buildings, locked up factories, and abandoned warehouses are sites where the Indiana Economic Development Corporation said there'd be thousands of new jobs. 13 News has been reporting on that lack of transparency for 15 years, resulting in then-Governor Mike Pence announcing a new IEDC transparency portal, which 13 Investigate showed to be mostly smoke and mirrors. Hundreds of big projects announced by IEDC do not show up on the transparency portal at all.
They're not there.
Our years of reporting led lawmakers, both Republicans and Democrats, to demand more transparency from IEDC. But those efforts have always met resistance by the legislature, a legislature that actually passed laws allowing IEDC to keep its activities and spending secret. Thursday afternoon, I asked Governor Braun if granting that secrecy was a mistake.
I would say that it was a mistake, because if there's any hint that something should be more transparent, you ought to get out of the gate that way.
The IEDC says the forensic audit should take somewhere between 6 and 12 months, and the bill for that audit will be paid by the state agency that's being investigated. At the State House, I'm Bob Siegel, 13 Investigates.
Governor Braun also signed an executive order that requires IEDC to make more of its financial information public. As Bob mentioned, 13 Investigates has been reporting on skewed numbers and secrecy within the Indiana Economic Development Corporation for years. You can watch his original investigation into the IEDC dating back to 2010 on demand. We've got it right here on WTHR+. As of this week, the Federal Department of Government Efficiency, or Doge, says it saved $160 billion through cuts to what it calls unnecessary spending. And an NBC News poll just last month shows most people like the idea of making government more efficient. But the same poll shows people are concerned about how the feds and Elon Musk have gone about making those cuts. Those of you who've lived here in Indiana for a while remember former Governor Mitch Daniels was known for tightening the belt at both the state and national levels. He was also the White House budget director for President George W. Bush. So I asked him this week what he makes about all this, what he thinks about it. Here's part of our conversation.
I think the so-called Doge was a good idea and a good start, but it should never have been presented as more than that. There's a real limit as to what they can do. Rumbling around the federal government without real portfolio. Congress is going to have to step up with this problem, and frankly, the president too. Eventually, we are really doing a serious injustice to future generations by borrowing money wantonly the way we are, spending it not on investing in their future, but on today. And ultimately, Doge can nibble around the edges and should. It's a good start to illuminate some of the really preposterous, outdated, obsolescent, duplicative things the federal government does. But the big money ultimately will have to come from saving the safety net, reforming the entitlement programs in a way that protects vulnerable people, but also protects our children and grandchildren against debts we piled up and they'll have to pay.
That's a hurdle that we haven't really seen lawmakers jump.
No, every time somebody speaks the truth about the promise of the fact that these perfectly worthy programs, Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid, we've made promises we can't keep. Every time someone speaks the truth about that, someone on the other side chops their head off. So I understand why career politicians don't want to deal with it. But it is, we have waited far too long. If we'd gotten started, say, 8, 10, 12 years ago on some of these changes, the problems that are now inevitable could have been ameliorated or even prevented. But such is life in a world of elected politicians.
You can find our entire conversation online at WTHR.com. And that does it for this week's edition of Crossroads Politics. You can watch us every week at 10 a.m. on Sunday or on demand at any time here on WTHR+. For Bob Siegel, Emily Longnecker, and Nikki Kelly, I'm Dustin Grove. Thanks so much for watching. We hope to see you again next time.